The massive chamber filled with strange voices and clicking sounds as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the most important meeting in 1,000 years. Ambassador Zeth Kara stood at the center podium, her crystal-like skin catching the blue light that filled the council chamber. She looked around at the 47 different species that made up the Galactic Council and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. "Friends and fellow representatives," she began, her voice carrying through the vast space, "we face a problem unlike any we have seen before. The species called humans have broken our most sacred law." Far across space, Captain Jake Morrison walked onto the bridge of the UES Liberty and felt pride swell in his chest. The ship stretched 12 kilometers from front to back, its dark, metal hull covered with weapons and technology that no alien race had ever imagined. Through the main window, he could see stars scattered like diamonds across the black of space. "Captain," called Lieutenant Lisa Campbell from her station near the communication panels. Her fingers danced across glowing buttons as she monitored signals from across the galaxy. "We're getting messages from the Council. They want us to give up our ship." Jake moved to stand beside her, reading the text that appeared on her screen. The message was clear and direct. The Galactic Council demanded that humanity surrender the Liberty for what they called inspection and destruction. They said the ship violated laws that kept young species from building powerful weapons. "They're scared," Jake said quietly, watching the words scroll past. "They've kept us locked up for 50 years telling us we weren't ready to join them as equals. Now they see what we can really do." On Earth, Admiral Nathan Brooks stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Screens covered every wall, showing him images of space battles from the past, star charts, and most importantly, live feeds from the Liberty. Beside him, Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez checked readings from the ship's revolutionary engines. "Sir," Amy said, looking up from her tablet, "the Liberty's systems are working perfectly. The gravity drives are stable, weapons are fully charged, and our shields could probably stop anything they throw at us." Nathan nodded but felt worry gnaw at his stomach. Humanity had spent 30 years building the Liberty in secret, hiding it in the asteroid belt while they worked. They knew the Council would never allow them to build such a powerful ship. The aliens had rules about what young species could and could not do, rules that kept them weak and dependent. Back on the Council station, Ambassador Zeth Kara continued her speech to the assembled representatives. "The humans have built what they call a Titan-class warship. Our scientists say it uses technology we don't understand. Gravity weapons, space-bending shields, and engines that shouldn't be possible." A low growl came from the back of the chamber, where the hegemony delegation sat. Overlord Vexthul was ancient even by galactic standards, his gray skin marked with scars from a dozen wars. He had seen species rise and fall, had watched the Council crush rebellions and enforce their will across 1,000 worlds. "This cannot be allowed," Vexthul said, his voice like grinding stone. "Young species must learn their place. We have rules for good reasons. No race should have such power until they prove they deserve it." On the Liberty's bridge, Commander Ryan Phillips studied tactical displays that showed Council ships moving through nearby systems. The aliens weren't just talking about the situation. They were preparing for war. Navigation Officer Kelly Barnes worked at her station, calculating jump routes and escape paths. "Captain," Kelly reported, "I'm seeing fleet movements from the Orion sector. Big ones. The Council is sending everything they have." Jake felt his heart rate increase but kept his expression calm. He had trained for this moment his entire career. The son of a farmer from Kansas, he had joined the Space Force. When humanity first reached the stars, he had worked his way up through years of service, always knowing this day might come. Dr. Helen Carter approached from the science section, her lab coat wrinkled from hours of work. She carried a tablet filled with data about the Liberty's performance. "Captain, you need to see this. Our test flights showed the ship can do things we never expected. We're not just matching alien technology. We're years ahead of them." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just built a ship that could fight the Council. They had built one that could win. The question was whether they should use that advantage or try to find a peaceful solution. Meanwhile, in the Council chamber, Emergency sessions continued around the clock. Species that had been enemies for centuries put aside their differences to face what they saw as the human threat. The Altarian Republic offered their quantum computers to help track the Liberty. The Cetacean Alliance promised their fastest ships to help hunt it down. Ambassador Zethkara felt sick as she watched the galaxy unite against humanity. She had studied human culture and found much to admire. Their art, their music, their stories of struggle and triumph resonated with her own people's history. But fear was a powerful force, and the Council had ruled through fear for so long that they couldn't imagine any other way. Jake Morrison stood alone in his ready room, looking at a picture of Earth that hung on his wall. Blue oceans, white clouds, brown and green continents. It looked so peaceful from space. But he knew that billions of people down there were counting on him and his crew to keep them safe. The communication system chimed, and Lisa's voice came through the speakers. "Captain, we're getting the final ultimatum from the Council. They're giving us 24 hours to surrender the ship and submit to their authority." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his wife Sarah back on Earth, about the children, who would grow up either free or enslaved depending on what he did next. When he opened them again, his decision was made. He walked back onto the bridge where his crew waited for orders. These men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing they might never come home. They believed in humanity's right to stand equal among the stars. "All hands," Jake announced, his voice carrying through every deck of the massive ship. "Prepare for battle stations. Today we show the galaxy that humanity will not bow to anyone." The Liberty's engines hummed with power as the ship turned toward the Council fleet. War was coming, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Council's Supreme Chancellor Vexthol raised his massive form from his chair, and the entire chamber fell silent. His species had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. When he spoke, worlds listened and obeyed. "Fellow council members," he began, his words echoing through the vast space. "We face a choice that will determine the future of galactic civilization. Do we allow this human ship to exist, or do we destroy it before it can threaten everything we have built?" On the Liberty, Commander Ryan Phillips worked with his tactical team to prepare for what everyone knew was coming. The ship's main computer, called Atlas, ran thousands of battle simulations every second, calculating odds and outcomes. Navigation Officer Kelly Barnes studied the star charts, looking for advantages they could use. "Sir," Kelly said, pointing to her screen, "I'm tracking 300 Council ships heading this way. They're coming from 5 different sectors, all converging on our position." Ryan felt sweat on his forehead despite the cool air on the bridge. 300 ships was more than humanity's entire space fleet combined. But the Liberty wasn't like other human ships. It was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Jake Morrison received reports from every section of his massive vessel. Engineering Chief Sam Torres confirmed that the gravity drives were running at full power. Chief Weapons Officer Danny Wright reported that all weapon systems were ready for combat. Lieutenant Commander Beth Stone coordinated with the smaller human ships that were racing to join them. "Captain," Beth said, looking up from her communication station, "Earth Command is sending everything we have. 50 ships are on their way, but they won't arrive for 6 hours. Jake nodded, but knew that 50 human ships wouldn't make much difference against the Council's armada. The Liberty would have to fight alone, at least at first. He thought about the years of preparation that had led to this moment, all the secret meetings and hidden construction yards. Dr. Helen Carter worked in her laboratory deep inside the ship, running final checks on the exotic matter reactors that powered their most advanced systems. The technology was so new that she wasn't entirely sure how it worked. Human scientists had discovered ways to manipulate gravity itself, something that had taken them beyond anything the Council had ever achieved. "The gravitational field generators are stable," she reported to the bridge. "We're ready to test them in actual combat." In the Council chamber, Ambassador Zethkara tried one last time to prevent the war she saw coming. She stood before the assembled representatives and spoke with passion about the importance of peace and understanding. "We should try to negotiate with the humans," she said. "They built this ship to defend themselves, not to attack us. If we show them respect instead of threats, perhaps we can avoid bloodshed. But her words fell on deaf ears. Too many species had suffered under council rule to risk losing their power now. The hegemony wanted to crush humanity before they could inspire other rebellions. The Altarian Republic feared that human technology might make their own worlds vulnerable. The Cetacean Alliance saw an opportunity to prove their loyalty to the Council. Fleet Admiral Quindar of the Cetacean Alliance commanded the massive armada that approached human space. His flagship alone carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Around him, hundreds of other vessels prepared their weapons and shields for battle. All ships, he broadcast across the fleet. Remember that we fight not for conquest, but for order. The humans must learn that young species cannot challenge the established powers of the galaxy. On the Liberty, Lieutenant Pete Murphy monitored the defensive systems that would protect them from the coming assault. The ship's shields worked differently from anything the Council had ever encountered. Instead of absorbing energy, they bent space itself around the vessel, creating a barrier that could theoretically deflect any attack. Shields at full power, Pete reported. The gravitational field is stable and ready. Communications specialist Ben Johnson intercepted Council transmissions and translated them for the human crew. The aliens were confident that their superior numbers would quickly overwhelm the single human ship. They had no idea what they were really facing. "Captain," Ben said, "they're planning a standard attack formation. 3 waves of ships, each, one designed to wear down our defenses until we surrender." Jake smiled grimly. The Council was using tactics that had worked for centuries against species with conventional technology. But humanity had thrown away the rulebook when they built the Liberty. Their weapons didn't fire energy beams or plasma bolts. They fired compressed gravity waves that could crush matter at the atomic level. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Paul Graham prepared his medical bay for the casualties he expected to treat. The Liberty carried a crew of 8,000 people, all volunteers who had signed up knowing they might die in humanity's first real war. He had supplies to treat injuries from energy weapons, explosive decompression, and radiation exposure. "All medical teams to stations," he announced throughout the ship. "This is not a drill." Admiral Nathan Brooks watched everything from Earth's command center, feeling helpless as the situation spiraled toward violence. He had commanded the project that built the Liberty, had overseen every detail of its construction and testing. Now he could only wait and hope that their gamble would pay off. "Sir," Amy Rodriguez said beside him, "we're getting real-time data from the Liberty systems. Everything looks good so far." Nathan studied the displays that showed the Council fleet's approach. In 6 hours, the most powerful military force in galactic history would clash with humanity's greatest achievement. The outcome would determine whether his species lived free or died fighting. Back on the Liberty, Captain Morrison gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. They met in the ship's main conference room, surrounded by screens showing tactical information and fleet positions. "We all knew this day might come," Jake said, looking each of them in the eye. "The Council has kept humanity locked up for 50 years, treating us like children who couldn't be trusted with real technology. Today we show them what we're really capable of." Commander Phillips reviewed their battle plan one more time. The Liberty would use its superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Council's attacks while striking at their command ships. Their gravity weapons had never been tested in real combat, but simulations suggested they would be devastating. "Remember," Jake told his officers, "we're not fighting for conquest or revenge. We're fighting for the right of humanity to stand as equals among the stars. Every person on Earth is counting on us." As the meeting ended and his officers returned to their stations, Jake remained alone for a moment, thinking about the weight of command. In a few hours, he would give orders that would either save humanity or doom it to extinction. The Liberty turned toward the approaching Council fleet, its massive engines creating ripples in space-time itself. War was no longer a possibility but a certainty, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 800 hours Galactic Standard Time, and Captain Jake Morrison felt the weight of human history settle on his shoulders. The Council's ultimatum had expired, and there would be no more negotiations, no more attempts at peaceful solutions. The Liberty's massive bulk turned to face the approaching enemy fleet as battle stations sounded throughout the ship. "All hands, this is the captain," Jake announced over the ship-wide communication system. His voice carried to every deck, every corridor, every station where humans prepared to fight for their species' future. "Today we stand not just for ourselves, but for the principle that no race should bow to another out of fear." Chief Weapons Officer Danny Wright felt his hands shake slightly as he powered up the ship's primary weapon systems. The gravitational cannons had never been fired in anger, only tested against empty space and asteroid targets. The exotic matter that powered them was so dangerous that one miscalculation could tear a hole in space itself. "Primary weapons charging," Danny reported, watching displays that showed energy building to unprecedented levels. "Gravitational cannons will be ready to fire in 60 seconds. Engineering Chief Sam Torres monitored the massive reactors that powered the Liberty's most advanced systems from his station deep in the ship's core. The exotic matter containment fields held energies that could power entire cities, all focused on bending the fundamental forces of the universe to humanity's will. "All reactor systems stable," Sam called out over the noise of humming machinery. "We're ready to show these aliens what human engineering can do." Lieutenant Commander Beth Stone coordinated with the approaching human fleet from her communications station. Earth had sent every available ship to join the battle, but they were still hours away. The Liberty would have to face the initial assault alone, one ship against 300. "Captain," Beth reported, "I have Admiral Brooks on secure channel. Earth Command is tracking everything." Jake nodded and opened the channel to Earth's command center, where Admiral Nathan Brooks waited with the rest of humanity's leadership. The responsibility felt crushing, knowing that billions of people were depending on the decisions he made in the next few hours. "Nathan," Jake said quietly, "if we don't make it through this, make sure everyone knows we died fighting for freedom." "You'll make it," Nathan replied, though Jake could hear the worry in his old friend's voice. "The Liberty is the finest ship humanity has ever built. Trust in your crew and your technology." The Council's armada came into visual range as a wall of metal and energy that stretched across the starfield. Fleet Admiral Quindar's flagship led the formation, its massive bulk bristling with weapons that had conquered 100 worlds. Around it, ships from dozens of species moved in perfect coordination, their combined firepower capable of turning planets into dust. "Human vessel," Admiral Quindar transmitted across all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of 3 millennia of galactic dominance. "This is your final warning. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded or face the consequences of your defiance." Jake stood at the center of the Liberty's bridge, surrounded by his crew and the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. He thought about his wife Sarah back on Earth, about the children who would grow up either free or enslaved depending on what happened in the next few hours. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Liberty," he replied, his voice calm and steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "We reject your authority over humanity's right to defend itself. If you wish to test our resolve, you'll find us more than ready." The transmission ended, leaving only the sound of humming engines and beating hearts. Across the bridge, Lieutenant Pete Murphy monitored the defensive systems that would protect them from the coming storm. The gravitational shields created a barrier of bent space around the ship, something the Council had never encountered before. "Shields at maximum power," Pete reported. "Whatever they throw at us, we're ready for it." Communications specialist Ben Johnson tracked the enemy fleet's movements and intercepted their tactical communications. The Council commanders were supremely confident, discussing how quickly they would crush the single human ship and what punishments they would inflict on Earth afterward. "They're planning a 3-wave assault," Ben reported. "First wave of 100 ships to test our defenses, then 2 more waves to finish us off." Tactical Officer Nina Walsh worked with the ship's AI to plot firing solutions and calculate battle outcomes. Atlas processed millions of variables every second, accounting for everything from enemy ship capabilities to gravitational effects from nearby stars. "Captain," Nina said, "Atlas recommends targeting their command ships first. If we can disrupt their coordination, the rest of their fleet will be easier to handle." Dr. Helen Carter made final adjustments to the exotic matter systems from her laboratory, knowing that humanity's survival might depend on technology so new that she was still discovering what it could do. The gravity weapons worked by creating focus distortions in space-time, effects that could crush ships or tear them apart at the molecular level. All weapon systems are performing beyond specifications, she reported. We're as ready as we'll ever be. The first wave of Council ships broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the Liberty, their weapons already charging for the attack. Plasma cannons that had burned entire fleets prepared to fire, ion beams that could slice through battleships focused on their target, and missile systems that had never failed to destroy their enemies armed themselves for war. Jake felt time, slow as the moment of truth approached. Everything humanity had worked for, everything they had built and dreamed and hoped for, came down to the next few minutes. He thought about the generations of humans who had looked up at the stars and wondered if they would ever walk among them as equals. All stations report ready for combat, Commander Ryan Phillips announced from his position beside the captain's chair. Then let's show them what humanity is made of, Jake said, his hand moving to the communication controls. All weapons, fire at will. The Liberty's first shot split space itself, a beam of compressed gravity that moved faster than light and hit with the force of a collapsing star. The lead Council ship simply ceased to exist, its matter compressed into a point smaller than an atom before exploding outward in a burst of pure energy. The second shot followed immediately, then a third and fourth as the gravitational cannons fired in sequence. Each beam erased another enemy vessel from existence, leaving only expanding clouds of particles where mighty warships had been. Direct hits on 4 targets, Danny Wright reported, amazement clear in his voice. They're just gone, Captain. Our weapons are tearing them apart. The Council's return fire struck the Liberty's shields like waves against a mountain. Plasma bolts that could melt through armor plating were bent around the ship by gravitational fields. Ion beams that had cut through the strongest metals were deflected into empty space. Missiles that had never missed their targets exploded harmlessly against barriers of twisted space-time. Shields holding at 96%, Pete Murphy called out. Their weapons can't even scratch us. Fleet Admiral Quindar watched in horror as his most powerful ships were destroyed by weapons he couldn't understand. The human vessel seemed untouchable, shrugging off attacks that should have vaporized it while responding with impossible firepower. All ships concentrate fire, he ordered desperately. Focus everything on that ship, but the Liberty was already moving, its gravity drives allowing it to accelerate and maneuver in ways that defied physics as the Council understood them. The massive vessel danced between enemy formations, its weapons firing continuously as it carved a path of destruction through the attacking fleet. Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all, watching displays that showed the tide of battle turning in humanity's favor. The Council had ruled through fear and superior technology for so long that they had forgotten how to fight an enemy that was actually stronger than them. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity would no longer be contained. The battle that would reshape the galaxy began when 200 Council ships opened fire at once, their plasma batteries unleashing enough energy to burn entire continents. The combined firepower of the fleet lit up space like a new sun, all of it focused on the single human vessel that dared to defy galactic law. The Liberty's shields absorbed the assault with ease that shocked even its own crew. Lieutenant Pete Murphy watched his displays in amazement as gravitational fields bent space around the ship, deflecting attacks that should have destroyed them instantly. The exotic technology worked exactly as designed, creating barriers that no conventional weapon could penetrate. Shields holding at 96%, Pete reported, his voice filled with wonder. Captain, their weapons aren't even making a dent. Captain Jake Morrison felt a surge of pride in his crew and their incredible ship, but he knew the real test was just beginning. The Council had never faced an enemy that could match their technology, let alone exceed it. Today they would learn what happened when humanity stopped playing by their rules. All weapons return fire, Jake commanded, his voice carrying across the bridge. Show them what human engineering can accomplish. The Liberty's response was devastating beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Chief Weapons Officer Danny, Wright fired the gravitational cannons in sequence, each shot sending compressed waves of spacetime toward the enemy fleet. The beams moved faster than light itself, arriving at their targets before the aliens even realized they had been fired upon. The first torpedo struck a hegemony battlecruiser and crushed it like an empty can, its mile-long hull compacting into a sphere smaller than a basketball before exploding in a burst of pure energy. The second beam caught 3 ships in formation and tore through them like paper, leaving only expanding clouds of debris. Direct hits across multiple targets. Danny called out, his hands steady on the weapons controls despite the magnitude of destruction he was unleashing. Our gravitational torpedoes are performing beyond all expectations. Tactical Officer Nina Walsh coordinated the assault as the Liberty's main cannon charged for its first full-power shot. The weapon drew energy from the ship's exotic matter, core building up gravitational forces that could theoretically crack a moon in half. Main cannon ready to fire, Nina reported, her fingers dancing across targeting controls. I have a clear shot at their command formation. The cannon fired once, its beam invisible to human eyes but visible on sensors as a distortion in space itself. The gravitational pulse tore through 12 council ships in a single devastating shot, their armored hulls crumpling like tissue paper as spacetime bent around them. Communications. Specialist Ben Johnson intercepted panicked transmissions from the enemy fleet as their commanders tried to understand what they were facing. Ships that had never known defeat were being destroyed by weapons that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. Captain, Ben said, listening to the alien chatter through his headphones. They're calling for reinforcements. Their fleet commanders are reporting weapons that manipulate gravity itself. Engineering Chief Sam Torres monitored the exotic matter reactors from deep within the Liberty's core, making sure the incredible energies remained stable and contained. The technology was so advanced that one mistake could turn their own ship into a black hole. All systems nominal, Sam reported over the noise of humming machinery. We can keep this up for hours if we need to. On Earth, Admiral Nathan Brooks watched the battle through quantum-linked sensors, seeing real-time footage of humanity's first major space battle. The command center buzzed with activity as staff officers tracked every shot fired and every ship destroyed. Sir, Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez said beside him, the Liberty is exceeding all performance projections. Our gravitational weapons are 50% more effective than our best simulations predicted. Nathan felt relief and pride, warring in his chest as he watched the tide of battle turn decisively in humanity's favor. The Council fleet that had seemed so overwhelming was being systematically destroyed by superior human technology and tactics. Fleet Admiral Quindar stood on his flagship's bridge, watching in horror as half his armada was reduced to scrap metal and energy clouds. The Cetacean Alliance had never suffered a defeat like this, had never even imagined that such a thing was possible. All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel, he ordered desperately, but his voice lacked the confidence it had carried just an hour before. Focus everything we have on bringing down their shields. The remaining Council ships obeyed their commander, pouring every weapon they possessed into attacking the Liberty. Plasma cannons, ion beams, particle accelerators, and quantum torpedoes all fired at once, creating a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. But the human ship continued to dance through the storm of energy, its gravity drives, allowing it to accelerate and turn in ways that seemed to mock the laws of physics. Commander Ryan Phillips coordinated the defensive maneuvers from his station, using the ship's incredible agility to avoid the worst of the incoming fire. Evasive pattern Delta, Ryan called out to Navigation Officer Kelly Barnes. Keep us moving, and give Danny clear shots at their capital ships. The Liberty twisted through space like a living thing, its massive bulk moving with impossible grace as it wove between enemy formations. Its weapons never stopped firing, each shot precisely aimed to cause maximum damage to the Council fleet. Dr. Helen Carter monitored the battle from her laboratory, watching sensor readings that showed how their gravitational weapons affected local spacetime. The technology was so revolutionary that she was still discovering new applications for it in real time. Captain, she reported over the communication system, our weapons are creating gravitational anomalies that are disrupting their navigation systems. They're having trouble targeting us because space itself is being distorted. Lieutenant Commander Beth Stone received reports from the approaching human fleet, smaller ships that were racing to join the battle, even though their weapons would be almost useless against Council technology. It was the gesture that mattered, the willingness of every human vessel to fight for their species' freedom. Earth fleet will arrive in 4 hours, Beth announced. Admiral Cooper is requesting permission to engage any surviving enemy ships. Jake nodded but doubted there would be many Council ships left by the time reinforcements arrived. The Liberty was carving through the enemy formation like a sword through silk, its impossible weapons turning the galaxy's most powerful fleet into space debris. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Paul Graham treated the few casualties the ship had sustained, mostly minor injuries from equipment vibrations during high-energy maneuvers. The Liberty's advanced shielding meant that very little enemy fire actually reached the hull. Medical Bay reports minimal casualties, Paul announced over the ship's communication system. Whatever those shields are made of, they're working perfectly. The battle raged for 2 hours, but it was never really in doubt after the first exchange of fire. The Council's conventional weapons were simply no match for humanity's gravitational technology, and their rigid tactics couldn't adapt to an enemy that could bend space-time itself. By the time the shooting stopped, 300 Council ships had been reduced to fewer than 50 survivors. The remainder broadcast surrender signals and began retreating toward their home systems, their proud formations broken, and their confidence shattered. Fleet Admiral Quindar's flagship limped away from the battle, its hull scarred by near misses from gravitational weapons. The proud commander who had never known defeat now faced the humiliation of reporting to the Council that a single human ship had destroyed his entire armada. "All ships withdraw to safe distance," he ordered, his voice hollow with shock and disbelief. "Prepare damage reports and casualty lists." Captain Morrison stood on the Liberty's bridge, looking out at the wreckage of what had once been the galaxy's most feared military force. The battle was over, but he knew the real war was just beginning. The Council would never forgive this defeat, and humanity would need to be ready for whatever came next. "Stand down from battle stations," Jake announced to his crew. "Begin damage, assessment, and prepare for the next phase of operations." The Liberty had won the first battle of the war, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The aftermath of the Battle of Liberty Point sent shockwaves across the galaxy that reached every inhabited world within days. Species that had bowed to Council authority for thousands of years suddenly questioned whether the ancient powers were truly invincible. On 100 worlds, resistance movements that had been crushed long ago began to stir with new hope. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the Liberty's observation deck, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Council's most powerful fleet. Twisted metal and energy clouds drifted in the darkness, silent monuments to humanity's first victory in galactic politics. But Jake felt no satisfaction in the destruction, only a deep awareness that everything had changed. "Captain," Communications Officer Troy Adams called from the bridge, "we're receiving formal diplomatic requests from 17 different species. They all want to negotiate new treaties with humanity." Jake nodded and made his way back to the bridge, where his crew worked to process the flood of messages arriving from across the galaxy. The same aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now spoke of trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and technology exchanges. Ambassador Kate Lopez arrived aboard the Liberty 3 days after the battle, transported by one of Earth's fastest diplomatic vessels. She had spent her entire career studying alien cultures and preparing for the day when humanity might join the galactic community as equals. Now she faced the task of negotiating from a position of strength that no one had expected. "Captain Morrison," she said as Jake welcomed her aboard, "Earth Command has given me authority to establish formal relations with any species willing to recognize humanity's sovereignty. We're no longer asking for permission to exist." The Council chamber looked very different when the emergency session convened a week after the battle. Representatives who had spoken with absolute confidence now whispered nervously among themselves, their voices lacking the authority they had wielded for millennia. Ambassador Zeth Kara took her place at the speaking podium, but her crystal features, reflected uncertainty rather than the calm assurance she had shown before. The Altarian Republic had lost 12 ships in the battle, and their military leaders were demanding answers about how a single human vessel had achieved the impossible. "Fellow counselors," she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, "we must face the reality that our assumptions about human capabilities were completely wrong. Their technology exceeds our own in ways we never imagined possible." Supreme Chancellor Vexthol sat in his massive chair, looking older than his 3,000 years. The hegemony had built its reputation on military might, but that reputation lay in ruins along with their battle fleet. For the first time in his long life, he faced an enemy he could not intimidate or crush. "The human species," he admitted, reluctantly, each word seeming to cause him physical pain, "has demonstrated technological superiority that cannot be ignored. We must consider revising our policies regarding their membership status." On the Liberty, Dr. Helen Carter worked with teams of human scientists to analyze the battle data and improve their gravitational weapons even further. The exotic matter reactors had performed flawlessly, but she knew the Council would adapt their tactics and technology to counter humanity's advantages. "Captain," she reported during the daily briefing, "we're already seeing improvements in our gravitational field. Manipulation. The next generation of ships will be even more capable than the Liberty." Lieutenant Commander Beth Stone coordinated with Earth's growing fleet as more Titan-class vessels neared completion in shipyards across human space. The Liberty had proven the design worked, and now humanity was building an entire fleet of ships that could reshape the balance of galactic power. "Sir," she told Captain Morrison, "Admiral Brooks reports that 5 more ships will be ready for service within 6 months. The UES Constitution is already beginning her shakedown cruise." The Council's surrender had not been formal, but their retreat from human space sent a clear message to every species in the galaxy. The ancient powers could be defeated, their authority could be challenged, and their monopoly on advanced technology was broken. Fleet Admiral Quindar returned to his homeworld in disgrace, his once proud career ended by a single disastrous battle. The Cetacean Alliance court-martialed him for incompetence, but everyone knew the real problem had been facing an enemy with superior technology and tactics. "How could we have known?" he asked the tribunal that judged him. "They appeared to be a primitive species with basic interstellar capability. Nothing in our intelligence suggested they possessed weapons that could manipulate gravity itself." Ambassador Lopez established humanity's first embassy on the neutral station of Kepler Prime, a trading post that served as a meeting ground for dozens of different species. The building ceremonies were attended by representatives from 23 governments, all eager to establish relations with the new galactic power. "Today marks a new chapter in galactic history," she announced to the assembled diplomats. "Humanity seeks not domination, but partnership, not conquest, but cooperation. We offer our hand in friendship to all who will accept it." Dr. Paul Graham established medical exchange programs with alien physicians, sharing human knowledge of gravitational therapy in exchange for advanced xenobiology techniques. The cooperation between species that the Council had tried to control began happening naturally as barriers fell. "Their medical technology is fascinating," he reported to Captain Morrison. "Some of these species have healing techniques that could revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy." Engineering Chief Sam Torres worked with alien engineers to share technological innovations that benefited everyone involved. The rigid hierarchies that the Council had maintained for so long began breaking down as species freely exchanged knowledge and expertise. "Captain," he said during one of their engineering briefings, "we're learning as much from them as they are from us. Cooperation turns out to be much more productive than domination." The Liberty patrolled human space as construction began on a dozen new colonies, worlds that had been forbidden to humanity under Council law but were now open for settlement. Families that had dreamed of living among the stars finally had their chance. Captain Morrison often walked through the ship's observation lounges, watching the stars and thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. The crew that had faced almost certain death now served as ambassadors for their entire species, their victory having opened doors that had been locked for 50 years. communications specialist Ben Johnson monitored galactic news networks that spoke of humanity with a mixture of fear and respect. The same species that had called them primitive now studied human culture and technology with intense interest. "Captain," he reported, "the Altarian Republic just announced a new research program focused on gravitational physics. They're trying to replicate our technology." Navigation Officer Kelly Barnes plotted courses to new star systems as humanity began exploring regions of space that had been closed to them for decades. The galaxy suddenly seemed much larger and full of possibilities that no one had dared imagine before. "Sir," she told the captain, "we're receiving invitations to visit systems throughout the Outer Rim. Species that were afraid to associate with us before are now eager for human contact." The council no longer governed through fear and intimidation alone. They found themselves forced to negotiate, to compromise, to actually serve the species they claimed to protect. Some welcomed the change while others plotted revenge against the humans who had upset their carefully maintained order. But the transformation was irreversible, and everyone knew it. Humanity had taken its place among the stars not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as equals demanding respect. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species from the small blue world that had dared to dream of something better. "Captain." Morrison looked out at the star field and smiled, knowing that somewhere among those distant lights human colonies were growing and human children were being born free. The Liberty had won more than just a battle. It had won the future itself.